Thank you for tuning into the Health and Social Care Business Podcast. Here we highlight the people and businesses making a real difference in the sector. From everyday challenges to big industry shifts, we explore the issues providers face and how experts and organizations are stepping up with practical solutions. Our goal is simple: to bring you relatable insights, real stories, and actionable advice to help you navigate and thrive in the business of health and social care. Our guest today affectionately refers to herself as the Mary Poppins of social care. But what does this actually mean? Does she identify as a magical nanny, floating in with her bottomless carpet bag to bring order and joy to overwhelmed care providers? Or maybe she just knows how to tidy up a messy compliance report with the snap of her fingers and a knowing smile. In today's complex and very confusing regulatory landscape, we'll be discussing how she's using her clinical skills to raise care standards. Today, we don't need a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. We need the ever so lovely Paula Cashmore of Achievable Care Quality Community to tell us how she's using her clinical background to support providers raise care standards without having to compromise their well-being. So Paula, thank you so much for your time today, and it's an honor to have you.
What an absolutely amazing and lovely introduction. Thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, but I thought I'll start with something to kind of like ease you in and to make you chuckle a little bit. I was working on this intro for about an hour. I was like, I need to bring the movie into this intro. So I'm glad
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with your iconic nickname, which I love. Why do you call yourself the Mary Poppins of social care?
It was a joke that somebody on LinkedIn actually said to me in his comments. I have a vast experience, as you know, you may find out. So I've done lots of different roles, practically all roles that you can do in care. I've done those roles. But then I'm also a volunteer for the Prince's Trust. I'm a volunteer for National Association of Care and Support Workers, and I volunteer to be trying to set up a professional register. So each one of these things, as I was saying on LinkedIn, oh, I'm doing this now. There's a company called HWB Mobility, and he said, oh, you're just like Mary Poppins. And he said that twice. And so I put it in my strap line on my LinkedIn connection, and people started referring to it. And so I set up my website around the theme of Mary Poppins, and it's just become my brand. And for all the reasons that you have said, I have got so many tools in my bag that I use, but I also come in like Mary Poppins, tidy up and settle fractured relationships, get structure right, and then sweep off again to a new provider once my job is done.
I thought you were going to say you use singing.
That is one thing I do not do.
Okay, I absolutely love that. So you just said you have experience in every angle of care: clinical, operational, personal, and I love that you're a volunteer. That's something that I wish I would actually love to do more of. So how has that actually shaped the way you provide services today?
I think because I understand what each role needs, I understand what the challenges are of each role. So therefore I can mentor managers in order to promote the better environment for a carer. I understand what relatives need from a care provider. So having experience in all of those roles, I know what each department is looking for, what each role needs to be successful. And I think working to put all of the pieces of the jigsaw together to make the whole picture, that's why it's important for me, or it's beneficial for my clients, that I've had all of those varied experiences.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so when people think about social care, they don't actually think about it as a clinical practice. So the next question I have is actually for nurses. As you know, in our sector, the care sector, there are lots of nurses who are registered providers, or even perhaps nurses who are thinking of going into the social care space. How are you able to translate that clinical thinking? Because you're a nurse. Oh, I love that. So how are you able to transfer that clinical thinking into the care environment? And is it always clinical in the traditional sense?
Yes, definitely. If you're in a nursing home environment, there are certainly lots of different services that do use nurses as a clinical role. I always say to people, if you're a nurse and if you tell somebody you're a nurse, the first thing they say is, where do you work? If somebody says, oh, I work in intensive care, everybody goes, ooh. If you say, I work in a nursing home, it's like they turn their nose up. You only work in a nursing home.
Yeah.
Because it's not as respected. So what I say to nurses, tell people you're an elderly care specialist if you're working in an elderly care dementia home, or you're a dementia care specialist, or you're an acquired brain injury specialist if you're working in one of those homes. Actually identify what your specialism is, because as a social care nurse, 9 times out of 10 you're an autonomous practitioner. You don't have the backup of medical staff on the next floor or on a bleep. So you have to make those clinical decisions in a moment using your own professional knowledge. So it really is a truly clinical post for nurses that are in social care.
Okay, so you just said that you advise them to lead by their clinical expertise. I know you said that when people hear you work in a residential care home, it doesn't command the same respect as if you work in intensive care. But why does that matter?
It matters because we need society to understand that social care is the foundation of the health service. I think we're seeing at the moment the repercussions of not investing in social care. It has a knock-on effect from the NHS. So we have to have some sort of parity, especially on a clinical perspective, with the NHS, and social care does do that, and we need to let people know that.
All right, thank you. So I learned something earlier in my bidding career. I learned that healthcare is different to social care because the speak is different. Healthcare is more preventative, and then social care is the opposite. So with that lens, how does clinical skills actually help improve care standards in regulatory settings? And what I mean is, for clarity, is I know with residential care, for example, you have nursing care, which a nurse is actually required. And please correct me if I'm wrong. You've got the residential care where an actual nurse isn't required. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, yeah.
Bearing that in mind, going further into the community, don't care. If you as a nurse were to start a don't care practice, how does that clinical skill set actually help? And I say this because there are lots of nurses, again, who will go don't care. And I'm not talking about residential care where the nursing skill set's actually needed. Some might argue that in don't care, the nursing skill sets isn't. So how can a nurse use that to actually improve their service, and rather than just ignoring the fact that they're nurses?
I think from a leadership point of view,
right,
nurses who are running dom care companies, they have the oversight of what care plans are needed. They understand the comorbidities of the clients, and they can then instruct the carers as to what to look out for deterioration, and understand better how to involve external stakeholders in that person's care.
I also think of it like this. The NHS has fantastic training. So as a nurse, you would have been through that process, that really rigorous process. Bringing that into the community straight away automatically just kind of like sets you up above the rest, as opposed to perhaps somebody else who hasn't had that rigorous NHS training. Okay, so speaking about CQC, to go from good to outstanding, and I know I'm asking lots of clinical questions only because I know you're a nurse. For the listeners who are primarily nurses, they would want to know this. For a nurse, for example, or a clinical expert, or someone who has a dom care or supported living or whatever practice that is clinically led, how can they leverage that skill set to go up a notch? So to move from good to outstanding.
I think being a nurse gives you that edge on understanding what good care looks like. You know how to promote health. You don't need to be a nurse to give a good and outstanding service.
I like that.
But being a nurse, you should be able to use your skills, your management skills, your leadership skills, and your clinical skills in order to ensure that the care being delivered is of good standard and has the right outcomes.
A lot of things you do is around compliance. And as opposed to just looking at the regulatory framework of CQC and going ahead with the tick box exercises, what is the difference between a good practice and an outstanding practice?
Outstanding has to be something above what you would expect a company to deliver. If you're a dom care company, it's expected that you go into that person's home, deliver good care, and go out. But it's not expected that you arrange social events for your clients.
Okay.
So that might be an extra thing that you can look at with the well-being of your clients. If they're isolated, you can then actually be proactive and organise some social events. It's communication, things like ensuring that they have an immediate means of communication. They know who to ring, to call for different circumstances. It's quite difficult to get outstanding in a domiciliary care, just mainly because everything that you do is very time restricted.
Yeah.
And you're not there for the person for the whole day. But your systems, your safety, all of those domains have to go the extra mile, have to have that little bit extra that you wouldn't expect from good basic care.
Okay, so whenever you just think good, or whenever you just think this is what CQC expects, do better, do more.
Yes.
So for providers right now who haven't maybe had their CQC inspection, they're waiting, they're preparing, can you share some of the issues that are common when you go into a compliance check or an audit or whatever compliance that you do? For someone right now listening to this, what are the common issues that you found and how can they actually start to prepare?
I think it's not having a set audit system, either being overwhelmed with the audits that they have bought as a package and they are not fit for purpose for that service, or there are too many for that service, or they've committed in their policy for doing 10 audits every month and they only need one audit every quarter. So it's understanding what governance they've got in place and understanding that they're judged by their policies, keeping to what their policy says. You can change your policy to reflect what you do as long as it's good, safe practice. So if you say we have 7, 8 supervisions per year, you have to have 8 supervisions per year. You will fail on that metric if you do not have 8 supervisions per year. But if your policy says we have 3 supervisions and 1 appraisal per year, and you have those 4 things in place, it doesn't matter that you haven't got 8. It just matters that you've got the 4 that you said. You will be judged by what you say you will do in your policies. So it's understanding what's in your policy. And a lot of providers don't really read their policies. Same as recruitment. Sometimes safer recruitment seems to have gone out the window with the pressure of recruiting staff. It's anybody's better than nobody, so we'll get somebody in quick. They may have done verbal references but not recorded them. So it's making sure that everything is in place and the evidence is there for what you have done or what you plan to do. Those, I'd say, are probably the most common things.
You couldn't have said it any better, especially with regards to policies. Most people shy away from reading policies because a lot of times it's either the word, the jargons included in it, or the amount of words in it. But that clarification, it's key. Whatever you commit to saying in your policy, you have to do it.
Yes.
So your policies, as long as it's best practice, as long as it's within the range of the safe practice or what's considered to be safe practice, it's okay.
Yes.
That clarification, a lot of providers will probably relax reading that, because I know from my own personal experience, sometimes in policies, when I read policies, or when we have our interviews, when we're writing a bid and people are stating what they can do, especially when you know the team is small.
Yes.
Wear multiple hats. You just think to yourself, okay, if you say you can do this, that's fine. You probably have a method we don't know. So this clarification, I know it's going to let people breathe a little bit more, knowing that it's okay to do that. So next question I want to ask, I know the answer to this, but I just want to hear it from you. You recently posted a photo on LinkedIn, which I love, of you being a new grandma.
Yes. Yeah.
And then obviously you saw my comment. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a new mom. So babies right now are just everything.
Yes.
When I saw the photo, that got me, because I know you love your family, you're always talking about it. And yeah, I love that. So does your role as a grandma actually affect how you provide care? Very obvious answer, but I just want to hear it from you.
Well, yeah, because obviously I'm thinking of the future, because they ask, what does nanny do? What's nanny's work? And it's like, I help people give the best care to older people, because I want them to respect the older generation and to understand it's important that older people, because we know that social care is much broader than old people. But from a child's point of view, they have visited some care homes with me when I was working in care homes.
I love that so much.
Yeah. So they remember some of the visits that they've had. And so it's like nanny works here to make sure that the old people are getting good care. And they're sort of like 13, the oldest are 13, 14. And so they understand that actually some people can be lazy and some people don't do what they say, their friends. They can identify that when nanny says, I have to make sure people are doing their job properly, there's sometimes that people don't do their job properly. And it's important, again, as a management technique, to upskill and support people.
Okay, so you bring in your strict nanny hats to ensure that providers are doing exactly what they're supposed to do.
Yes.
But still with a bit of heart as well.
Of course. And you have to understand that people have got lives outside of their job.
Yeah.
Well-being is really, really important. But by the same token, the well-being of the clients is important. So we know that staff have lives outside of work and they're important, but we also have to remember the well-being of the clients as well. So we can't put one above the other in that space. So if somebody is not well enough to do the job, if they're having a lot of mental health problems within their work and they're off sick for a lot, then you have to manage them under the capability procedure. Yeah, so staff wellbeing is important, but if the job is so stressful for them, then we have to remember this is not the job for them, and it's only fair that you let them go in order to find something where they can flourish, not somewhere that stresses them so much that they can't work.
So you're referring to registered managers right now?
Registered managers, carers.
Okay.
But I think from a registered manager's point of view, they need to be given permission to manage unreliable staff out of the business. They need to be able to use their disciplinary and sickness and absence processes robustly without fear of going to tribunal. And as long as it's done properly, you can maintain good staffing and good quality care with the best carers. We can't allow anybody to be better than nobody. We can't allow poor carers to get away with substandard care because they have bad mental health. We can't allow unreliable carers to affect the well-being of the client by not turning up. We have to be courageous enough to manage that situation and say, no, we need to look after the well-being of our clients and we have to say goodbye to you. We have to give you the sack.
So imagine that's something that lots of providers struggle with. Not even imagining. Of course, we hear this almost every day. Can you just paint a picture for someone listening in right now? Because this is something that a lot of providers struggle with. Because number one, it's very difficult to actually find reliable staff. It's easy to hide under the guise of, oh, social care is a really mentally tasking role. When you're supporting individuals to enhance their daily lives, you come across lots of things that would affect you mentally. Of course, it's part of the role. But sometimes it's easy to hide under the guise of that and provide, like you said, be a not so good employee. When that happens, is this an area that you would come in and step in? And for a provider going through something similar, what is just one advice you could give them? Because that is a really common problem.
I think, for one thing, managers need to understand employment law a little bit better. They need to understand what they're allowed to do. They need to understand their staff as to whether this is an exceptional circumstance or whether it's something that's a habit, a regular occurrence. And then also need to find some support that is not risk averse.
Okay.
A lot of the consultant, HR consultant companies often say, oh, you've got to keep them just in case. And we need to be more proactive in rewarding the good staff and managing out those staff that care doesn't suit them.
Oh, okay. So what was the moments that changed everything for you? Right now in social care, there are lots of hearts being thrown at the sector, as you're aware. See, it's all over social media. What was that moment for you that changed everything?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. I think there was one time when I was working as a nurse and the rota manager rotated me on 3 nights, which was a rolling rota. I was happy to do nights, but she put me on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday. And with my circumstances, I couldn't do anything any of the days because Monday I was getting ready for work. Tuesday I was sleeping. Wednesday I was getting ready for work. Thursday I was sleeping. And then Saturday I was sleeping. So it was really awkward. And all I asked that rota manager was, could you put my nights together, please? Perfectly reasonable request. Turned round to me and said, you have to do what we say.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, do you know what? I don't have to do what you say. I have a choice of leaving. And I then took that choice to hand in my notice and leave and go to another provider that gave me a, reasonable shift pattern.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment, I thought, people have a choice. People really have a choice. And we have to remember that our employees have a choice. We also have a choice as to whether they control us or we control the business. Have you heard of the phrase, we can't let the tail wag the dog?
No. Is it a generational thing? Why haven't I heard of it?
Yes, I don't know. So that's some learning. It's like, instead of the dog tracts and it's, part of their employment, they can't say they can't do that. The manager needs to be empowered in order to offer training, offer the support, work out why they can't do something, and then take it from there. Is it a can't or a won't? And again, upskill, empower, and reward staff for doing well. And once a leader takes the leadership position, everything, falls into place a lot better.
Okay. So a moment that changed for you was the moment you realized that you had a choice. So you take this knowledge into supporting providers, helping them understand that their employees also has a choice. But
they have a choice.
And
yes.
They also have a choice. So it's that balancing act of letting everybody know that we all want to be here. We all made a choice to be here.
Yes.
So we all make an informed decision and choices to help provide the best service as best as we can.
Yes. Yes.
So with regards to CQC, coming to the end now, and we can't not talk about CQC and the single assessment framework. But a provider out there, and I know there's been so much been said about the single assessment framework and then the portal not working, and it's just been one thing after the other. So what is the current state of CQC? I know it's a very broad question, but you know what I mean.
Yes. Yeah, we've had a big leadership change. We know now that Sir Julian Hartley is in charge. And what he has said is he's going to assess the whole situation. So we've got the Dash report and previous year's reports. So he's looking at everything. There are rumours that this single assessment framework is staying, but the quality statements will be reduced.
Okay.
There's a lot of consultation, but at the moment, nothing is changing for providers. We have had no news yet of anything that is changing, and the most recent inspections are still coming out against the 34 quality statements that were released in 23-24. So until you hear anything different, carry on as usual, because ultimately your care should be given around the regulation rather than the quality statements. But the quality statements do break it down into bite-sized chunks that you can address your issues through those quality statements. But there looks like there will be change. I think he has said by September, by later in the year, so September, October, there will be more news, but that news doesn't mean that anything will change. So we're probably looking at another 12 months at least, based on the 34 quality statements.
Okay. So for providers out there who are just wondering, who want to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you?
The best way is to go through my website, achievablecarequalitycommunity.co.uk. There's a contact button on there and a newsletter sign up. My details are on the free newsletter as well.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so just before I let you go, Paula, we're going to do what I call it a game, quick fire rounds. So I'll ask you a question and it's nothing too hard, just talk about it a little bit. You can even give a one-word answer. So one clinical habit every provider should adopt as a clinician that you are. This advice could be not just to clinicians, just in general.
I thought about this one and I will go for skin integrity. The skin is the largest organ in the body and it can tell you so much. Dehydration, it can show you when people's hands are dry, legs are dry. Looking at the colour can show you about the circulation. Looking at the pressure areas and the colour and the damage. There's so much.
So one thing CQC inspectors really want to see, that's another quick fire question for you.
Confident management and understanding your policies, doing what you say in your policies, like we discussed earlier. That gives them a reassurance that you know what you're talking about.
So you mentioned, just to add more to what you've said, you've mentioned policies a few times. And if there's one thing I know, policies are there. They want to read the policies, but it's too complex for them to do. So I'm just going to go straight to the next quick fire question, which is one myth about quality improvements you'd love to bust.
I'd love to bust the myth that it's all about your audits. It's not all about your audits. It's all about the care and the outcomes. So you don't have to have hundreds and hundreds of audits to prove quality care. You have to give quality care and evidence it.
Paula, that is the third gem. As someone who is in the sector, supports providers, you are giving me gems. I love that. I would lead with audits. I would certainly lead with audits because I feel if you lead with audits, then everything else falls in place. But what you're saying is it's about quality care and evidence in quality care. All right. So one message you want every care manager to hear today?
That they're doing a really, really valuable but difficult job, and they need to get support from someone who understands what they're going through. I'm not talking about paid support just because that's what I give. They need a friend, another care manager, Skills for Care, registered manager network, Facebook groups. They just need to be able to vent and tell somebody what they're going through and get ideas, because it's a very lonely job as well.
Yeah, it's lonely, it's mentally tasking, especially because it's regulated, and sometimes the regulatory framework can be quite complex and subjective, actually. Could be misinterpreted. If there's one takeaway from this conversation, Paula, to providers is to read your policies and change your policies to fit best practices and evidence it.
That's what you do, yes.
And on that note, Paula, I just want to say thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
enjoyed this episode, we would love to hear from you. Let us know what about this episode you liked and how we can improve. Join our growing community of providers and carers who are learning new processes and technology, discovering proven best practices, growing through insights from industry experts, all from people creating real practical solutions in care. This is the Health and Social Care Business Podcast.